Hello and welcome to another Wilderness Tamed video, and this one we're talking about the holly and the ivy. So we'll start with the holly, a pretty instantly recognisable shrub or tree of British woodlands. A generally columnar to pyramidal shaped tree. So the leaves are heavily fortified with these rigid and quite vicious spikes. So from a gardening point of view, if you kneel down to do any work beneath a holly hedge or tree and you get one of these in your knee, you will know about it. So the berries, they're a valuable food source to many small mammals and also to a lot of birds. Our native thrush family, blackbirds, song thrush and mistle thrush, as well as the migrant visitors of the same family like the fieldfare and redwing. They're also very popular with florists and wreath makers, especially at this time of year, December. Holly will be made, especially the berried holly, into wreaths. And here's the aforementioned redwing gorging himself or herself on some holly berries. So a very valuable tree. So they form excellent thickets, known in olden times as hollins, Hollins. So if you see Hollin in the title of any place that you live or a street name, Hollinside for example, you'll know that it was named after a copse or a thicket of holly. Now they are excellent shelter, not only for birds but for mammals as well. And in a woodland situation, not a great issue. Obviously in parks and gardens you would need to manage the spread of holly, which can be via the seed from the berries or layering. The lower branches coming into contact with the soil, taking root and becoming another tree. They become so dense that they will shade out all your understory and ground cover plants. They're a sort of mid-canopy tree in a forest situation, so they won't dominate bigger stuff like rowans and oak and beech. Now, another instantly recognisable plant, the ivy. Now I'm in the plantation at the top of this street that runs along the village where I live, and this is a section of beech plantation. Now, some would argue that the beech, Fagus sylvatica, is not a native to northeast England and they should never have been planted here. But the curious thing about this particular section of the plantation is there's not a single sign of ivy anywhere. Now, beech is notorious for shading out other woodland trees, even the big guys like oak and sycamore and ash. Beech will dominate, and the understory or ground flora is very limited, and here it's limited to bramble very dense layer of leaf litter, which again will shade out a lot of delicate ground cover plants. And because beech leaves take ages to rot down, they're there for a long time. Now on the left here, this is a beech with ivy growing up it, and on the right an elm, but that's in a garden situation. So the ivy was obviously introduced as an ornamental. Further on into the plantation, and we're in amongst the conifers, and again there's absolutely no sign of ivy either covering the floor or crawling up the trees. This area has recently been thinned out, so it was much denser and much darker in here, which would account for the lack of ground flora. Again, the thing that's thriving in this particular area is bramble. Very unlikely to find conifers suffering with ivy, but do they suffer? And this is the argument. A lot of people think that ivy is a parasite and actually chokes and kills and starves the trees on which it grows. Of course, this is absolute nonsense. So I've had to wander along to the opposite end of the plantation to find a tree that actually has some ivy on it. And this is an oak. And you can see from some of the dead branches sticking out the side, it's obviously under some stress. But I would doubt very much it's ivy-related stress. This is something else. Now, ivy shrouding a tree can make it very difficult for anybody surveying the tree to get a grip on what's possibly causing the stress. But the ivy purely anchors itself and uses the tree for support. It does not parasitize the tree in any way, shape or form. The roots cannot penetrate the bark, they cannot rob the tree of nutrient, and they will only attach themselves to mature, sturdy trees. So young saplings and things that are rocking about in the breeze seem to be unattractive to ivy. You can see in the canopy of this oak there's still plenty of leaves clinging on, so they're not being shrouded out by a dense crown of ivy as yet. I mean, that may happen many, many years down the line. That's if this tree survives many years. As I say, there's something else ailing it. There's a lot of dead wood in the crown, but I can guarantee you nothing to do with the ivy. Now here's a larger collapsed tree which is heavily shrouded in ivy, and some would argue, well, it's the weight of the ivy's pulled it down. Again, let's look at the remains of the crown. If you look at the bark and the branches, they're devoid of twigs, they've snapped off at the ends. This has been a standing dead tree for some time, and it's died from some other reason than the ivy itself. Let's just walk around this shrub in front of us here, get a better look at this. A lot of split bark, a lot of cracked stem. Again, branches have snapped off, but they're old healed wounds. So it looks to me like something else has affected this, possibly a fungal disease. Here's another one leaning over the top of a fence, propped up with some sycamore. And this is a single stem, no sign of branches from the crown. They've obviously dropped off years ago. And there is quite an amount of ivy on this. This was standing dead wood for a long, long time. Then the ivy has grown up it, added weight to it, and a wind, Storm Harwin, actually brought it down. Here's another sizable oak. Again, it's in the grounds of the village hall, so most of that is garden, and hence the ivy, which was introduced as an ornamental, has got away with itself somewhat and is climbing the trees. this sycamore has some very young ivy growing on it, which in the future might cause a problem, but it's more likely that the problem will come from this. A whole scar from a dropped branch has formed a hollow in which fungus and invertebrates can infest. So you can clearly see here the roots from the ivy stems are basically just clinging to that sycamore bough, like Tom Cruise on a rock face, just fingertip grip, just to stabilise the ivy. They're not penetrating the bark, they're not extracting nutrients or water from the tree. It's a symbiotic relationship in a way. It's certainly not parasitic, as some people seem to suggest. In a garden situation, ivy has many attractive features. It can clothe structures and form nice archways such as this. It can clothe a trellis or a fence and make an evergreen barrier for privacy. Variegated forms, of which there are many hybrids, add a little bit of colourful interest. It can climb on walls, but be careful. In a wall like this, the stems would grow through any gaps in the water and they can cause heave and collapse in the rock. Again, the roots will not cause that amount of damage, they're just gripping on. But just be very careful. A rendered or mortared wall shouldn't be affected by ivy growing on it, unless there are cracks in the mortar. You can add interest to shrubs by growing ivy through them, like you can with, adding honeysuckle or clematis to a shrub. But it will start to creep and crawl, and it can obscure things like paths, patios, paving. So regular trimming and regular maintenance is fairly essential, as with many plants. Don't let ivy run away with itself, or it will, become a problem. You can see here it's starting to revert from the variegated form to the normal native form. The benefits of ivy are that it's an excellent nectar source in late autumn for bees and other insects. Fantastic pollination. Look at a couple of my shorts and you'll see bees and butterflies all over ivy flowers. Also followed by berries in the winter, which are an excellent fat-rich protein source for many birds. The flowers and the berries will only form on what people class as the adult phase of growth. But essentially it's that part of the ivy that has grown above and beyond whatever support it is on and is waving around in the air. I hope you've enjoyed this and found it useful and informative as ever. Thank you for watching, and I shall see you in the next one. All the very best.